Hi, welcome to the 13th Floor. I'm Marty Duda, and today we have film director Justin Pemberton with us. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on up. You've got a film showing at the film festival this year. It is called Capital in the 21st Century. Sounds very different than your sports-related films. You just did one about Richie McCaw a little while ago, so it's quite a jump from sports to financial.
But it is similar to some other things I've made before, so it's not that.
Yeah, that's true.
That was yeah.
And before we get rolling, why don't we take a look at the trailer for the film, and so we can people can get an idea of what the tone of the thing is, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Money,
power,
poverty,
extreme inequality. There's always been an elite monopolizing capital.
Moi, j'ai très peur en ce début du XXIe siècle à cause de ce que j'observe dans les données historiques.
In the 18th century, money marries money, so poverty is a death sentence.
The way the elite stays in power is also by shaping the way that we think.
Make America great again.
We have a mythology that what's good for Wall Street is good for Main Street, but that's really never been true.
People are bankrupting themselves.
This transformation of the economy is generating a small class of very wealthy people.
And extreme poverty.
In advanced economies, 2/3 of the population is now on track to be poorer than their parents.
Most people view this as some sort of generational fight.
What happens to taxation? Large amounts of wealth are moved offshore.
People have the money to make sure they stay at the top. The system is rigged.
This is producing a new social story. People are starting to say enough of the inequality and enough of not having a story about how this ever gets better.
We can absolutely link the rise of fascism and extreme poverty. It is all about money.
Blaming your neighbour doesn't make you any richer.
There's going to have to be a political and economic reset.
We have to make choices about which future we wind up in.
It's a move towards creating a new vision.
Alrighty, that was the trailer for Capital in the 21st Century, showing at the New Zealand International Film Festival this month, starting in a few days, and we have director Justin Pemberton with us. So I guess the first question for anybody when they've made a documentary is, why did you decide to make this film?
Well, it was a book that I bought when it came out.
You and 1.5 million other people, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, actually nearly 3 million.
Holy moly.
I know that's the English version, as the 1.5. Yeah, but it's been translated into 20-something languages, and it's, so it was a surprise bestseller.
Yeah.
And I kind of I heard about it when it came out and was creating that sort of buzz, and bought a copy of it. And then I heard that through some friends that a New Zealand producer, Matthew Metcalf, was talking to Thomas about making the film. And I absolutely knew that, this is something I want to make.
Right.
It's a topic that that has been of interest to me for many years. I'm a precariat. We used to be called freelancers, but now we're precariats because of the fact that it is such a precarious lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I have seen how that model has been evolving into less and less sort of, I guess, aspirational or well-paid labour, like taxi driving and pizza delivery.
Yep.
So this erosion of, I've always noticed, I don't have holiday pay, I don't have sick pay, I don't have any Kiwi saver contributions, and it's a tough kind of thing to
and it's even
manage.
worse in the States. Because usually healthcare is attached to your salary, unlike here. And I was working in the States as a freelance video editor in the early 90s, and you could see the shift change from I was working for big companies like Kodak and Xerox, and suddenly they realized they didn't have to pay people full time to do this work, that there were all these people around that they could just use when necessary and not have to be responsible for holiday pay and all sick pay and all that stuff.
And one of the big things, I think, so me and Thomas and Matthew are all kind of the same age. And the film opens with Thomas talking about being 18 and witnessing the fall of communism,
right?
You know, so we started to see changes within our lifespan, but we're quite young, and we're at an age where you are kind of seeing things being dismantled, seeing a new direction, a new promise. But of course, with that, we saw sort of, you know, the birth of debt and the soaring of house prices. And I started university, and there were student allowances and, you know, very cheap fees for my first year. By the time I finished, I had a student loan. Fees had gone up by over 1,000%, and, you know, I didn't even have my first real job yet, and I had debt. You know, so I think these things. The things that I've noticed, and what I loved about Thomas's book, is it spans for about 400 years, at least the film does, you know, because he starts before the Industrial Revolution, and we sort of peak into 2100 at the end of the film. So the concept of time horizons, I think, is so important, because within our lifespan, we don't really look beyond what we've seen. And I noticed that people a little bit younger than me, you know, have this sort of idea, well, it's just the way the world is. It's just the way the world is. It's always been that way, you know. It isn't the way the world is, and when you zoom out a little bit, you see just how much things have changed, and you start to realize they will change again. I mean, they actually have to change again. It's an unsustainable path that we're on at the moment.
So how is that change possible? And like I see in New Zealand, change is much more possible here because it's a smaller political place and whatever than in bigger entities like the States or whatever.
Well, it is a globalized and interconnected world now, so I don't think, I mean, New Zealand can't decide to change tax havens on its own. But, you know, the big thing with change, I think, you know, today's conversations are laws in 20 years. The first thing you need to do is start talking about it, showing it, revealing it, thinking about it. That's what the film does. I don't think we talk about capital and how it's the tail that wags the dog of everything. You know, it is influencing politics in a way that is not helpful to democracy. It's the reason we can't solve so many problems like tax havens, like climate change, like housing crisis, you know. So the first thing is, if we have functioning democracies, we know that we need to get rid of money in politics. and then
that's going to be a tough one to get it away from the people
who
have those
not.
things.
The biggest problem is the media and the way the media are sort of running the sort of the dialogue, and there are a lot of very wealthy people, Rupert Murdoch obviously being the most sort of famous, I guess, who control these debates. Now, if you got rid of tax havens, just that alone, you know, would bring in so much additional income to governments. And it's just talking about paying tax that me and you are paying on our wages, you know, that capital doesn't get to pay. If you solve some of these issues, 99.9% of the population will be better off. So it really should be a no-brainer, but it's not, because the narrative is very controlled.
And when you say, oh, that money would go to the government, there are so many people who, as soon as they hear money's going to the government, it's like it's being flushed down the toilet and it doesn't get to them.
Well, I guess those people never drive on a road.
Exactly.
They never
it's insane,
have any contact with police or justice system, or never been to a public school, or I mean, that's part of the problem. That's part of this concept that tax is bad, and that actually didn't change until after 2 world wars and the Great Depression, before people started to go, you know, tax actually can be good. Tax can help us. You know, anyway.
So how did you go about making the film? Once you decided that this is something that you could do, how did you approach it?
So reread the book, making endless notes. And the one thing for me is I started to do a timeline through history, and it was quite important for me to see how this event related to that event and that. And so I wanted the story to be chronological to help reveal the flow of capital and how our relationship changes with capital. It has lasting outcomes for us all. This is sort of the big goal. So in the book, Thomas very much jumps around through time, and we talked very early on about how the book and the film will be companions. The film can't be the book. I mean, it just can't be, because it's a 700-page hardback that is, you know, very dense in economic theory, but he also tells really great stories in the book. So he'll open his chapter perhaps talking about Jane Austen and, you know, Pride and Prejudice. And so that was a great point for me, because I started to go, okay, well, let's think about how much we talk about capital and our relationship with capital in pop culture. You know, it's in The Simpsons, it's in, you know, it's in pop songs. It's in famous literature and, you know, classic films, you know. So we decided to employ that as a really good sort of accessible way to tell this story, and also to make it not just entertaining but also not so dark. You know, when you can see this struggle going through time, and you can, you know, it kind of, I think it helps give you hope.
Right.
There's a lot of energy in darkness,
Yeah.
but it is dark. Capital. The story of Capital is not a beautiful story of progress towards enlightenment and, and caring at all.
Which leads me to the question of, because I haven't seen the film yet, so I'm looking forward to it, but do you address the idea of like conspiracies and people kind of, you know, the wealthy kind of banding together to keep the rest of the people, the population down? Is that part of what this is about?
I don't think there's any organized conspiracy. No, we don't talk about conspiracy theories like that. No, definitely not. I mean, Thomas is, you know, what was remarkable about him was that he actually was able to interpret and collect data going right back before the Industrial Revolution and analyze it. He put it online, so he was very transparent about it, so that other people could see how he got his conclusions. And I think the book is very fact-based. And so for me, I think if you watch the film and you want to go deeper and you want to investigate, you know, behind the scenes, that's what the book's for. And dive in by all means.
And the other thing that a lot of people think is possibly behind a lot of this is, you know, technology and pop entertainment is kind of put out there as a diversion, and a distraction, so that people who are in power can remain in power and they can do what they want to do, whereas everybody else is just staring at their phones or watching the latest Spider-Man movie, you know. So
well, that goes back to the Romans, you know, with bread and circuses.
Right.
So, you know, I think that is true. You know, is it now Kim Kardashian on your Instagram? That's the division. Certainly we are easily distracted.
Yeah, that's true.
And we do like convenience, so, you know, it's nicer sometimes to play in the digital arena and lose yourself in it and put filters on your face and make yourself look old or beautiful or whatever. You know, so but you know, I think yes. So these things aren't new, I guess, is what I'm saying. Yes, there's certainly lots of distractions, but I don't think it's too different than it's ever been before. Technology is interesting though, in the way that, you know, that it is going to have an impact on jobs in the future. So I think that is where it becomes more a capital crisis than just a problem, because, you know, not too far in the future, capitalism is no longer about labour. You don't need labour to make things, you know, or drive your cars, or deliver your pizzas, or, you know, anything. So, and Uber, by the way, is one of the companies that's heavily invested in getting rid of drivers. You know,
sure, why not? It's like their main expense, right?
It's so ironic, because when Uber arrived, it was seen as something to celebrate in terms of labour. You know, but it's not really.
And do you think that was the plan all along, or just the way things have evolved?
Goldman Sachs got involved with Uber very early on and bought 50% of it, and the Saudis own a good chunk of it too. You know, so I don't think it was ever supposed to be a revolution of labour. No.
So when you're making a film like this and you're addressing capitalism and fairly dense economic theory, how do you make that palatable? How do you make that into a film that people are going to want to come and spend 2 hours and watch?
Well, a lot of it is by employing pop culture, you know, right from the beginning, and so it moves through time, it moves through fast, it spans what I sometimes think of the greatest hits of history, in terms of like the big things that people know about, not because they're great by any stretch of the imagination, but, you know, you have got 2 world wars, Great Depression, colonization, slavery, you know, oil shocks, sort of the birth of neoliberalism, Reagan, you know, and all these sort of Thatcher, all that kind of things we know about, and we sort of draw a line and show how it went from this to this to this. But also, you know, we've got Lord and Dolly Parton and Wall Street and The Simpsons and Family Guy. You know, so there's it's energetic, and it's a good it's a good yarn. I think it's certainly not too complicated for people.
Oh, well, that's good. And so, who are some of the folks that you have? I don't know if they're talking heads or if they're who's involved in
talking heads. I mean, they are. You could call them talking heads, I guess, in the sense that that's what they do. But they're not on screen for most of the film.
Right.
But in many ways, I wanted to find people who could tell amazing stories, and they could narrate the story of capital for us. So Thomas is obviously one, but there's Francis Fukuyama, who is another famous kind of political commentator. Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel Prize winning economist. Gillian Tett, who is the editor of the Financial Times. N. Bremer, who is a famous sort of American commentator and geopolitical risk advisor. I mean, there's some great minds, and it was a lot of fun to be able to go and talk about this with them.
Right.
But they're good storytellers, and that was my biggest thing. I only wanted to talk to people who could tell me a good story.
Sure. And as a filmmaker, is making a documentary like this a team effort or more of an individual effort on your part? Do you feel like this is, your personal thing that you're kind of out there doing?
Well, it's certainly made by a team,
Yeah.
but it does need to be led in a way, and it
Yeah.
does need a vision. So it's kind of a little bit of both.
And so, how do you? What was your vision for the film?
Well, one of the first things is I developed an idea of what the film could be, and I sent it to Thomas.
Right.
And Thomas had a look at it, and he was really positive actually, which was a real thrill. He did also say, look, I think you need to do a little bit more here, and we need to focus on this. And he definitely wanted to make sure there was enough history. That it wasn't too focused on just today, because the story, his big insight was what was unique about his story, why it captured people, was because it told that huge story across time.
Right.
And then we chose the characters together as well. He put some people on the list, I had some people on the list, so we collaborated like that.
Oh, that's great.
And then I also went and shot some little test scenes and cut them and went and showed them to him, and he liked those. So, and then he basically just said, off you go and make it.
There you go.
Yeah.
So what do you hope that people will take away from the film?
I mean, the big thing is, I hope it can show and reveal a force that maybe we're not thinking about as much. And particularly in New Zealand, we did have a big debate around capital gains tax, but I don't think we really talked about capital properly. And I think it was quite a skewed conversation.
It didn't go well.
So I think the big thing is a discussion and talking about it and being able to see the world for how it's moving and where it's going. And like I said, I think change starts with the discussion.
Cool. Well, thank you for discussing it with me. I appreciate you coming up here, and looking forward to seeing the film when it's on the big screen.
Thank you.